Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Brian. Welcome to the Great Man Podcast.
In Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil says, "One of my cleverest devices for mind control is fear. I plant the seed of fear in the minds of people, and as these seeds germinate and grow, I control the space they occupy." Here are the devil's 6 most effective fears to control the minds of people. Number 1, fear of poverty. Number 2, fear of criticism. Number 3, fear of ill health. Number 4, fear of loss of love. Number 5, fear of old age. And number 6, fear of death. Note that the number 2 fear on this list, right behind the fear of poverty, is the fear of criticism. The fear of criticism is the ultimate circuit breaker. It prevents your power from flowing, dimming your life force, and blacking out your impact on the world. Here are just a few examples of how fear of criticism shrinks your life, and many of these come directly from the men in the Great Man Mastermind and the Facebook group. You don't put yourself fully out there in business, in love, in self-expression. You don't go after the role you really want. You don't speak up for what you truly believe in. You don't take the stages to make your voice heard. You don't speak with as much conviction, or you dilute your message. You don't launch the business or the blog that you've been dreaming of, or you don't promote your business as fully as you could. You don't step into the leadership positions that you desire. You don't command the money you know you deserve. And on the list grows. Now, the great man within you is not impervious to criticism, but he is not immobilized by it. He refuses to allow his life to be shrunken by external forces. The great man within you always lives from the inside out, relying on his inner compass to guide his life's actions, even when the outside world seems to be throwing daggers. Now, I see so many potential great men sitting on the sidelines of their own lives because they fear being rocked by criticism that their inner worlds are not yet ready to withstand. And gentlemen, I have been there at many times in my life as well. That is why doing this inner work and having a community of supportive men who will take the field with you is essential for you to build the capacity to receive criticism and alchemize it into courage. Today, Brian and I share with you examples about how we've been publicly criticized for the work that we do and how painful that was for us at first as we were learning how to navigate criticism and building that internal structure, and how much stronger we are today for building the inner fortitude to handle it. And more importantly, we talk about how much freer and fully self-expressed and powerful our lives feel now that criticism no longer has the same crippling effect. The same power and freedom is at your fingertips if you are willing to step into the arena with us. Enjoy today's episode on turning criticism into life-changing courage. Bri, right before we hit the record button, I heard some sad news that Debo from the movie Friday passed away from COVID. And I know that you said that you actually had a chance to meet that guy at some point in your life.
I did. I met Debo. I'm not sure what his real name is, but I don't
think anyone does.
His most famous role is as Debo. I played basketball with him in LA on the outdoor courts of LA. He was big but slow.
Big but slow. Did he have any game, or did he just take up space in the paint?
No, he had skill. He did have some skill, but he was a little slower. And I don't know how old he was. That was probably 15 years ago.
Yeah,
that was a while ago. But he was a really nice guy.
Huh?
Like he knew that everybody knew who he was.
Yeah.
As Debo, and nobody knew his actual name. He was a sweetheart of a dude, and I was sorry to hear that he's passed.
Yeah, Rip Debo, man. Because obviously, like his character in Friday he was the bully, and to hear that like he's like the polar opposite of that in real life, that's cool to hear. So sorry for his loss. So one of the ways that I like to kind of pass time on YouTube, mindless time, is by watching Jimmy Kimmel's segment that he does called "Celebrities Read Mean Tweets." Have you ever watched this stuff, Bri?
I have. It's great. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So for anyone who hasn't, who is either not familiar with Jimmy Kimmel's show or Celebrities Reading Mean Tweets, it's pretty much self-explanatory. They get a bunch of celebrities to go on the show and read these tweets, real live tweets from people who have just been trolling these celebrities. And they say some really horrible, like hurtful, painful things at these celebrities, and the celebrities read them, and then you get their real-time reactions. Sometimes it can be really awkward if like the celebrity's just, I don't know, not rolling with the punches. Other times it can be really entertaining. And these clips on YouTube get like millions upon millions of views. I thought that was kind of a helpful analogy to open up our conversation today around one of the things that cause us to shrink big in our lives, which is avoiding criticism, right? And if we think about, these celebrities, we celebrate celebrities for a variety of reasons. They're inspirational or they're excellent at what they do. We oftentimes forget the downside, which is the criticism that comes with it. Like anytime you're in the spotlight, anytime that you are self-expressing, you open yourself up to criticism. And we oftentimes forget that these celebrities are also human beings with insecurities, with vulnerabilities, that are still raw, that have pain that we don't know about. Now, you and I are very far things from celebrities. But one thing that I will say that we have done pretty, I would say prolifically over the last 2 years with this podcast, with the Discerning Dick live event series is, you and I have opened up the kimonos quite a bit in our lives and shared from our hearts, shared parts of our lives that we never dreamed or even ever wanted to talk about, like vulnerable things. And we have opened ourselves up to some criticism. So I thought that in service to you men, our listeners who are looking to live the great man within you, who are looking to step up and share more of yourself, whether it's like something creative that you want to share, a business you want to start, a perspective that you want to write about and post in a blog form or on social media, to kind of share with you some of the shit that Brian and I have coming our way to let you know like how it's felt to be on the receiving end of that and how we've grown through the process.
When I look at my world of criticism, it's not very big that I know of. Like known criticism, out in the open criticism, it's not very big. Last night during our mastermind group, we talked about failure. And you asked the group to think about moments of failure, right? And what we took, the gifts that came from those failures. I had a litany of things, a bunch of things I failed at. And I started to notice that my fear of failure has been diminished every single time I go through that experience. When I think about criticism, I do not have that same litany of experiences when it comes to criticism. When you said criticism, the thing I thought about, I was like, previous partner of mine's ex-boyfriend before me didn't like me and said so out loud to people. That's fair. Like that's acceptable criticism. I'm okay with that. But I haven't, other than like a feedback session at work or some constructive criticism, I don't have much. So I am anxious to hear what kind of criticism that me or you are getting as part of this podcast.
It's really interesting what you're like, as you're saying that, what's coming true to me is you can almost calibrate your level of comfort receiving criticism with the volume of criticism you're experiencing. Think about it this way. It's like if you're receiving no criticism in your life, chances are you are deathly afraid of receiving criticism and you've engineered your life in a way that you don't receive it. Because like that's very true for how I lived most of my life. Like I didn't have the internal structures that would allow me to withstand something that could be received as a criticism. So like I was always people pleasing, I was placating, I was diluting, my power and what I said. I didn't have a strong perspective or an opinion because I couldn't handle the criticism or the potential criticism that would come back. As I've gotten stronger on the inside over these past number of years, as I've taken more of a stand, as I've had more of a perspective that I've shared, I get increasingly more criticism. So it's almost like you can look at the volume of criticism in your life as a pure indicator of how afraid or not you are of it.
Yeah, if we had a Google Analytics for Dominic, that'd be a really good key metric to look at. How much criticism are you giving?
Right. So they're perfectly correlated. It's like when your fear diminishes of criticism, you receive more of it because like you're going to express more of who you are. So the thing that catalyzed this conversation was today I was looking at some of our more recent reviews on Apple Podcasts for the show. I love going through and seeing, good or bad, the reviews that we get. And every so often we get a 1-star review. Over the years, the past 2 years in running the show, we've had a few 1-star reviews, most of them directed at me. Today we got one that was directed at you, Brian.
Thanks, Dad. Thanks, Uncle Rick.
We have today a 1-star review that is explicitly directed at you, Brian, and you haven't had a chance to read this yet.
Oh, beautiful.
You've courageously opened yourself up to hearing it for the first time on the show. And I will read yours in just a moment, but I think it would be helpful for me to go first here because about a year ago, I think I remember coming to you about this, Bri. There was one day where it was like a battery of 1-star reviews on like they kind of came like one moment right after the other. So it seemed like this coordinated attack, and they were very clearly coming after.
It was my posse. I was like, you gotta knock Dominic off his goddamn pedestal and throw some 1-stars at him.
Yeah. So let me read through these. Okay. So each of these Apple podcasts comes with it's a headline. So we're basically doing our own Jimmy Kimmel version of we're reading mean tweets, mean reviews directed at us. So you get the headline and then the body. Here's the headline. So. That's like the title of this piece of feedback. So, 1 star. Dominic and Brian discuss interesting topics, but seem very inexperienced, almost like amateurs, especially Dominic. I've attended a few of their events and enjoyed some of them, but this podcast isn't very good. And Dominic's tone is very condescending. Okay? That's one. Second review that came in right behind that. Subject. Dominic needs to go. And by the way, this one's written from Ray of Sunshine 787. 1 star. This podcast is so lame. Brian has great stories and is very funny, and I don't care for Dominic too much. Okay. And then
oh, man.
Number 3. By the way, I think after I read that one, I reached out to you. I'm like, dude, if you want more airtime, Brian, just let me know directly. You don't have to fucking write reviews. So thank you, Ray of Sunshine. Here's the last one. Subject, not worth your time. And this is written by Nick Brown, 40, 1 star. I've given this podcast a few listens, and while I do appreciate it, I have some critiques. I really wish we could hear more of Brian's perspectives. Dominic comes across very narcissistic and self-serving. It is hard to get through an episode when he seems so inauthentic. I think Brian should do some solo episodes. Actually, that was the one where I was like, dude, if you want more airtime, just let me know.
That's right. If you want me to do the intro, I'll do the intro. So, Dominic, before we go to Brian's 1-star review, maybe you can tell me, after experiencing 3 1-star reviews, how did you handle it? Was it something? Was it nothing? What went on in your mind?
It was actually, okay, I was pissed because of the 1-star reviews, like the 3 of them that came back to back to back. It seemed like it was a coordinated effort with someone who had an axe to grind or someone who had access to grind. I was pissed more so because of how it could reduce the overall rating of our show. It is hard fucking work to get people to go and just like do a 5-star, like to write any kind of review. I mean, like the amount of times that we ask and the conversion rate to that is really challenging. And the reviews are super useful to attracting new audience members. And we have this big vision of getting 10 million men on a path. If our show doesn't have like a 4.5-star rating or above, then people will like raise an eyebrow and move on. So the fact that like 3 of those 1-star ratings, do you know how many 5-star ratings it takes to make up for that? To get it back to 4.5? So I was pissed.
Ask any Uber driver.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. And Uber drivers know about that. I was pissed because of that. The thing that felt good about it was when I started to read those, I clearly saw it for what it was. It was someone who had like an issue with me that doesn't resonate with me, that had an axe to grind with me, or maybe someone I'd wronged in the past. Like, who the hell knows? And while it annoyed me at first, I was very quickly able to catch and release it because like it did not hurt my feelings. It didn't cause me to lose any sleep at night. And it also actually gave me a moment of real reflection to look back at how far I come. Because like when I, 4 years previous, like to these, bad reviews, when I'd first launched, let's say my email list, and, I was sending weekly email letters out to, people who I was trying to drum up coaching clients. I remember the most painful thing was looking at my email stats and seeing when people unsubscribed. You know what I mean? Like if I had like 100 subscribers and then I would send out an email and then I would see like 2 people unsubscribe, that would cause me so much pain. And then when I would go and see the people who unsubscribed, if I knew who they were, then that would be like a knife in the heart. It's like, why would they do that? Like I know this person. I thought they liked me. And that would cause me to lose sleep and I would be afraid. Now you fast forward to these, 3 1-star reviews, I was able to laugh at it. And, like I said, the thing that pissed me off was like how it reduced our overall rating, especially as we worked so hard for the show. But it wasn't about me being personally attacked at all. So I could almost look at it as like a badge of honor of, wow, look how much stronger my inner structures had become.
Got it. So it was a point of reflection for, I can handle this. So your threshold had gone up and it didn't knock you off your game.
It made me feel stronger. Like it quite honestly, it did make me feel stronger to see how far I'd come. So are you ready for your 1-star review, my friend?
I am. Yeah. I'm bracing myself.
By the way, like I've got plenty of more like other reviews from my book, from emails I've sent out, from social media posts that I plan on reading here today as like a way for us to unpack why it's so hard for us to share and how so many guys get stopped or how we dilute our power or our self-expression because of, these one-offs, these people who come out and like, want to condemn you and why that happens. So let me just read yours. And this one has the subject line, love this show, but ... Actually, you know what? I'm sorry. This is not a 1-star review. This is a 5-star review. Okay. Someone gave us a 5-star review on this, but there's a little bit of shade being thrown at you.
Let me just get this straight. You're saying my worst review is a 5-star review? That's what you're saying?
Yeah.
I'm good. Keep
You're
going.
Good. It says, honestly, Dominic, why Brian? He doesn't fit. He's too immature and he doesn't offer much reflectively. Is it that he represents the young and uninitiated? Confused. Why not do this show on your own or find a more enlightened partner?
I feel like they nailed it.
Do you really?
Yeah, that's exactly my role. Are you kidding me? Like, come in, just be a little bit. I don't have things figured out. And no, I mean, look, I think what I enjoy about this podcast is a space where I can come in and bring what's real. And so, people can feel like that maybe is immature or not fully there. And that's totally okay. Because I think in a lot of ways, that's where a lot of people are at. And quite frankly, in my life, and even how we start off the podcast, like these are areas that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives. And it's true. We're on the journey. So how am I taking that 5-star review? Okay.
Yeah. Do you feel any particular emotion in your body right now?
I feel tightness. I feel some tightness in my chest. Yeah. But it's not heavy. It's just kind of there.
What's that tightness saying?
Oh, it's the story. My tightness sounds like a voice in my head that's like, are you immature? Have you not figured it out? Maybe you don't have the answers. Why should you be on this podcast? What do you bring? What's your value?
And as you're hearing that, like yourself say that, what's the feeling that comes after that?
Well, I've heard that voice a lot in a lot of different areas, not just podcasts. So I know it's there and I know the intelligence that voice has and it's not very high.
Huh. Yeah, right. It's that inner critic. Like what you were just saying, Brian, like you and I have had some really lengthy conversations about like who we are on the show and what roles we play. And like we are very deliberate in the position that we take. Like you and I have both discussed that your role on the show is the voice of the listener, right? And my role is like, I'm the guy who's kind of a few steps ahead on that inner work journey. Oftentimes I can become too rigid. I can become too intellectual. I could, like you described once, like sometimes, Dominic, I feel like when you start going, you're on an ice luge and I can't stop you. And it's like, I need to get grounded. I need to help you unpack, like slow it down so I can metabolize what it is that you're saying. And also sometimes I can get too fucking serious. And like, you come in and break it up and make like, remind me that this isn't life or death. So together, like we've both had to get really clear on like the roles that we're playing and how like we are better together than we are separately. And I have a reaction to this review here. Do you care to hear
What's your reaction?
Like, I really would like this to come from truly the most like conscious, most honest and truthful place. Okay. And this is what's coming. Go fuck yourself. Like, I mean that from the bottom of my heart. Like, go fuck yourself. Because if you've actually listened to this show, you will understand that my boy, Brian, is a deep son of a bitch. This guy does the work. He has heart. He has opened himself up in courageous ways to talk about stories in his life that have benefited thousands of men who listen to this show. He has opened up my life. He's taught me things about myself that I haven't been able to crack on my own. He's given permission to dozens of men in the Great Man Mastermind, hundreds of men in our Facebook group to be playful about their failings and shortcomings and to open up honestly about the areas of their lives that they've been hiding or fooling themselves with. And so I feel like the honest, most compassionate, self-expressed way that I can respond to this is to tell you to go fuck yourself. And in the past, I think I would have bypassed that feeling, thinking that's not spiritual. That's not, you should be above that. If someone's going to say something to me, I'm cool with that. Let you have your opinion about me. But if you want to come after people that I care about, like you, Bri, or my sister, or my family, you're going to get a whole different side of me. I think that anyone who has listened to the show at all would recognize how much fucking bullshit this review is. Here's something I'm going to ask from our listeners who also feel the same way about you, Brian, as I do. If you are listening to the show on Apple Podcasts right now, press pause and go write a review. Say something nice about Brian, like in the review and what he's meant to the show for you. Because like I said before, like these reviews mean a lot to the people who are just driving by and take a look at it. If this is at the top of the list, someone who's never listened to our show before could actually look at this and believe it. And I want this voice to be washed out because anyone who's actually listened to the show knows it's the furthest thing from the truth. So if you have ever received anything of value from Brian before, press pause, write a review, and say something kind about him or say how he's benefited your life in a review on the show. That's my piece. I'm off my high horse.
Yeah, I can feel your fierceness, man. And I appreciate it. Sometimes it's easy to get some feedback, and where my head typically goes is like, cool, how can I improve? How can I be different? How can I be better? But this podcast is a place that, and one of the few places in my life where I try not to perform.
Yeah.
I try not to put on a front where I got to do the good thing. I can just be myself. And for you to sit there and defend me like that, I appreciate it because it allows me to continue to come and be exactly who I am without trying, without performing.
Yeah.
And that's my commitment. I will continue to do that in this podcast. And if people have real feedback, like they're actually trying to make a different sort of feedback outside of just blowing off their top, I'm open to it. Come to us with that.
Exactly. I mean, listen, like there's a million different ways that you can give someone feedback in a constructive way if you actually mean it, right? Like this person could have gone through doinnerwork.com and sent an email privately and asked that question, but decided to pose it in the form of a review where, everyone could see it. And you're open to doing that. You have the choice and the option to do that, but I have very little respect for you if that's the way that you're going to go about doing it. But to broaden the lens here, to bring the conversation to include all of our listeners, the reason why it's so important to be in a community of other people, like other men who got your back, right? Who are supporting you, especially like when you are speaking out more publicly, or you're going to be creating, or you're starting a business, or, living out over your edge differently. It's for moments just like these, because Brian, like you were just saying, it felt good for you to hear me defend you in this moment. Like that you don't have to pretend or even respond to that or justify that at all. And I know what it felt like for me when I first started doing my blogs and my video blogs and my newsletter on my own, like it felt like I was out on an island. I wasn't able to take the same kind of risks. I did have John O'Connor as my coach, which was super helpful because there was that level of support. But beyond that, that was it. I had my 1 hour a week with John. Over the years, as I have built out like my fucking army of support, we've got our Monday night men's group. We've got the Great Man Mastermind. There's countless other groups and other relationships I've forged and deepened since then. I've got my coach, David Waldis, who's been on the show, and on and on and on. When I've got an army behind me, you think a message like this, if it was coming at me, you think that would even bother me for a millisecond? It's because I got all these other guys and women in my life who truly matter. And that allows me to step up and speak from a place of power that I have been diluting for a long period of time in my life.
And I think most importantly here, it was a 5-star review.
Yeah.
It's the worst 5-star review that we've ever got. I'm very conflicted on this. It's like, thank you, man, fuck you.
Yeah. It was an incongruent 5-star rating.
Right. I'm just confused by this.
So let's take this a step deeper. Last night we were in the Great Man Mastermind talking about failure. And I just released an episode not that long ago called The Life-Changing Magic of Failing Spectacularly. I think it was episode 191 or 192, something like that. It's this whole conversation about how, failure is oftentimes the bounce off the bottom for you to achieve that new level of breakthrough in your life. Napoleon Hill in Outwitting the Devil talks about how oftentimes hitting that rock bottom, hitting that dead end is that necessary break in the habit pattern that you've been living in your life so that you can call into question everything that you've been doing and then create something new. When we don't have that failure or we don't have that criticism, we oftentimes just kind of toil around in our mediocrity, not putting ourselves out there fully.
Well, and Dominic, one of the questions you asked yesterday is, what is the fear that's holding you back from achieving the things that you desire?
Yeah.
And for myself and for at least 5 of the other guys that spoke up in that session, it was all around criticism.
Yeah.
People had books written. They had social media posts already done that have not seen the light of day because they're afraid, we're afraid of what happens when we put that out.
Absolutely.
So failure is one thing. But criticism is almost more heinous, or the fear of criticism is more heinous because nothing ever gets done.
That's right.
Nothing ever changes.
Or we hold off. Things take so much longer than they need to. I mean, listen, I understand that. Like I said before, I built my life in such a way where I received very little criticism or only the criticism I felt like I was ready to take because I didn't have the inner structures, the inner foundation that could withstand putting out a post on social media about a perspective I really believed in, or sharing a piece, a creative piece of art. When I say art, not like a drawing, but something artistic in terms of a story or a perspective, and then having nobody comment on it, being the disappointment I could feel from it just being so unspectacular that it just gets a couple of likes and then disappears into the ether. So that frightened me so much that for years I didn't share.
I think that's a key right there, because that's a nuanced part of this is it's going to be unspectacular, which means that it might not even get criticized. I can almost say thank you for the criticism because you're putting time and effort into the criticism. Whereas when they say that this is the death of all relationships, it's not someone cheating. It's not somebody hating someone. It's actually apathy.
Yes. Yes.
And that is almost more terrifying than criticism. But same game, same category.
You're right, because I feel, even now, because I'm not impervious to criticism or the disappointment of putting something out that I've put a lot of my heart into and then it just not being well received. I think that is actually the thing I struggle with more right now is the disappointment of lack of response. So over these last few months, I've really stepped up my Instagram game. I've been posting mostly daily, with content. The thing that happens much more often than the criticism is the disappointment in lack of engagement. There are times where I'll put out stuff where I was like, man, I thought that was really fucking good. Or this is an insight that I feel is it's unique, it's profound, it's got depth to it. And, it got, a fraction of the likes I thought it would, very few comments. And to me, that's frustrating. Sometimes it can be unmotivating. It can call into question, like, why the fuck am I doing this? Especially, when I go on other people's accounts and I see them posting something that's like, it's trite or it's regurgitated or, it's like on the surface and people are going bananas for it. And I shake my head and I want to throw in the towel and go, what the fuck? And again, like this is where the inner work component comes to it, which is I'm fueled off a sense of knowing, like a deep inner sense of knowing that I'm coming from the right place, that I've got something to say that like men need to hear and women need to hear. And that if I continue staying devoted to the game and refining my craft, it's inevitable that it will be recognized. But I can tell you, man, like 3 or 4 years ago, Bri, I would go through the undulations of, I would create something, I'd put it out. If it wasn't well received, I'd be wounded, and then I would hibernate and I wouldn't create again for a while. And then I'd have to come out of my hibernation, I'd create something. And then if I got liked a lot, it was all based on like external validation. And I would keep going as long as it was there. But then once it was like, it was pulled back from me, I'd go back into hibernation. Now I've been able to get myself to the point where it's like, because I say so, I'm going to create, not because of like what's coming back.
Dominic, talk to us about how do you balance that? Now, we've talked a lot about living this life of duality and having to be in two worlds at one time. And feedback is one of the best ways to grow.
Yes.
It's one of the only ways that we can see our blind spots and we can change. And at the same time, living in this life of duality, you have to know what you stand for. You have to know like what is good and right to you. How do you feel that? When you get criticism, when you get feedback, how do you know this is a time to be open and understand and grow and change versus no, this is where I am. This is who I am.
Yeah. So that's a great question, man. And I hope I do justice in this answer because it's a really important one for people to understand. Listening to feedback, it's essential. But if I am weak internally, if I'm coming from a place of fear, and if I don't have the inner structure or inner fortitude to handle either a lack of response or outright criticism, then I'm going to allow the outside world to dictate what I create, right? Now, once I've strengthened my inner fortitude, like the place I feel like I'm in now, which is I have a knowing that I have a message to share and that I've got to get it out, I can actually listen much more clearly to when I do get criticized and to when my posts don't get engagement. I can listen much more clearly because I'm not layering on lack of self-worth. I'm not layering on, is this all worth it? I'm not questioning, I'm not polluting the feedback. That's the most important point. Like I'm no longer polluting the feedback I'm getting. So I can listen much more clearly and go, on Instagram, I'm noticing that my posts that do like the most, like that get the most traction are when I actually speak to women and I give them insights about the inner worlds of men, because I have 62% of my followership are women. And by the way, women are always the ones who share much more than do men. And I think that there's studies that have shown that anything that goes viral, if you trace it back to the origins of where the virality of any post or any like YouTube clip has started, it's women. They're the ones who share. So like I can see that stuff much more clearly, whereas in the past it would have all been about like, oh, fuck it. People are only interested in the superficial.
Yeah. So you're able to notice and gain the value from the feedback because you're not triggered by it.
Yes.
Because you can actually see it because you know where you stand.
Yes.
Otherwise, and this happened to me in my first business. I remember going to pitch VCs for our first business. I would do the presentation and they would look at it and be like, hey, Brian, I think you need to change this and change that and change this. I said, okay, great. And I'd run back to my place. I would change the PowerPoint presentation, put 4 or 5 hours into it, and then go to the next VC. And the next VC is like, hey, Brian, like this looks good, but you got to change this. You got to change that. You got to do this different with your business. And I would go back and I would change that. Right now, multiply that over 50, 60 times. And I didn't do anything.
Exactly.
I was just changing shit because people were giving me feedback to change it because I didn't really have a clear direction on what we were and what we stood for.
Exactly.
I was also triggered every time I heard that. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're not going to get the money that we need to continue the business. So now we got to change. We got to go. Where I'm finding success this time is when I say, this is what we're doing. And yes, that's an opportunity, and this is an opportunity, and thank you for your feedback. I appreciate that, but like that's not what we do.
Yes.
And that has felt like the biggest difference in this business than my previous business. Setting those boundaries and saying no and say that's actually not what we do. Sorry, there are other people that do that. You should definitely go see them. So like this idea of whiplash happens in our personal life too.
Yeah, that whiplash. You're making me think of one of my favorite shows is Boardwalk Empire on HBO. I know a lot of people haven't seen it, but Steve Buscemi plays the lead character in that. His name is Nucky Thompson. And he gets asked this question, Nucky, like, who are you? And he says, I am whoever I need to be. And then the response back to that is, how does that make you anyone at all? That's basically what you just said around the first VC experience was every VC told you what you should be. And so you were, I am whoever I need to be. Like there was no inner compass. There was no root or roots in the earth. They were pushing you around and you had 50, 60 different versions of your pitch and it didn't work. Now you know who you are and you can take in that feedback from the outside world and be like, okay, like some of these are good ideas. Others of these don't fit. And I'm not going to be a good fit for you. And I don't need your approval, but thank you. And so that's why this inner work game is so important because unless you are stabilized, rooted, you can't hear the feedback clearly enough. And you're not going to have the kind of confidence that's necessary to share those deeper truths.
Dominic, you know that I believe feedback is a superpower to growth. And criticism can suck unless we've, of course, done the inner work and have the foundations for that. But there's another type of feedback that's fucking amazing. It's appreciation.
Yeah.
And it's just another form of feedback. And I'm curious, man, like I think you've probably gotten some 1-star reviews. You've probably gotten some 5-star reviews. I'm curious what happens to you and the type of feedback that you've received that fits into that appreciation category.
Yeah. I mean, so to give a radical contrast to everything we've been talking about, which is this criticism element, which anytime you're going to be sharing, self-expressing that comes with the game, I've never experienced the level of appreciation and respect. And a word that I would also use that I've received is a feeling of admiration from others. Like that's a big word, admiration. There's a difference between like I was respected in the corporate space, like, respected as a leader because of how like I showed up in integrity. I've received words of admiration and people have even used that word to describe how I'm showing up in my life today, because like there's a lot of stuff I put out on the surface that people seem to think is courageous, right? An example of that happened recently was back in November, I think it's October, November timeframe, I ran a 6-week program called Power Up Your Purpose and Productivity. Free 6-week course that about 200 men signed up for, 100 men went through. And at the end of that 6-week course, a couple days after it was over, I woke up to an email in my inbox on a Saturday morning. 12 of the guys in the group decided to surprise me with a testimonial video, just thanking me for the experience that they had over that 6 weeks, sharing with me like how they felt about their lives before and how they felt about their lives after, and how I was the cause in their lives for helping them to feel so much better about themselves. And they said things like, what you are building here and what you and Brian are building with the podcast is truly profound. Like there's a movement that's happening. I'm blown away by the men that I've had a chance to meet through this program, through the Facebook group that I never thought existed outside of myself. Like that they can feel that something magical is happening and that they really admire that we saw this first and that we're doing what it takes to bring it together. That fucking cracked my heart open, man. Like I sat there and it was really hard for me to like let all of that in at first. Like I had to really, it's sometimes difficult to receive that level of appreciation and for the world to stop. Like, Bri, every man knows what it's like to bust his ass, to put in the effort, to go the extra mile when no one else is looking, to put in the effort that no one else will ever reward him for because they can't see it. And then to have like time stop where all of the other guys look at you and tell you you're doing a good fucking job. That brought me to my knees, man. My heart cracked open. And I want that for every man. Like, I want every man to experience the gift that those 12 guys gave to me in that form. A 13th guy wrote a check for $1,000 and it was just like, I want to say a thank you. Here's $1,000 to sponsor a man who can go through your program next year. You know,
this is a free program, correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So a guy's paying you $1,000 because of the impact that you had on him.
Yeah. So like, these are the things that are available to you guys. If like you can build the inner structures to weather those storms and then to actually share of yourself in the most authentic of ways. So yeah, man, that's how I would answer your question.
And Dominic, what does that do for you? So that's what you felt when that happened. And that was upon your reflection. When you now go into the world and create what you're doing, what impact does that appreciation have on you as you continue to create?
Dude, that day was a springboard. We haven't talked a lot about this on the show. We are going to in the near future. But after I watched that video, I did a psilocybin mushroom journey for 4 or 5 hours that afternoon. For that entire time, I was in this super high vibrational state, taking that gratitude that these men had given me to create the next 50 years worth of work. I had a chance to see how many men around the world are hungry and craving for community, who want to be appreciated the way that I was just appreciated. And it lit a rocket. It was like rocket fuel up my ass to create that in the most powerful way. So like, I've been flying for the past, I think 4 or 5 weeks since I received that message, building, emboldening, offering. So yeah, like when that appreciation comes and when I'm able to let it in, it is rocket fuel.
Yeah. And so for everybody listening to right now, we've seen 2 very clear examples. One of criticism, which is sometimes important, right? Sometimes we gotta cut, right? With the criticism. But you can feel it in your voice, Dominic, like you're like where you're at and how that fuels you into your next thing. And that's appreciation, man. It's all just feedback.
You know what time it is. Every single one of these episodes leads to you taking one inspired action in your life to apply the principles or the insights or the wisdoms or the ahas that you had, especially from today's conversation around fear of criticism. Now, I imagine that something kicked up for you and exposed an area of your life where you are shrinking or not fully going after or not speaking up for what it is you truly want in your life, where you were sitting on the sideline and now it's time to get into the arena and play that game. And it is so critical that you have support as you go after these bigger things so that you can start to fortify your inner foundation so that criticism becomes less of a compelling force in your life to stop you from going after what it is you want. So head over to the Great Man Within Facebook group, declare what it is that you are going to be going after, ask men for support if you need it, or at the very least, just let the guys know that you're going for it and maybe you will inspire someone else to go after what they want in their life. And that gives you an opportunity to be a leader. So head over to the Great Man Within Facebook group, let us know what you're going after, let us celebrate and support you, and I'll see you in there.